In today's video, I'm going to be showing you guys the exact process that I took that basically taught me what a good image is and what a bad image is. Now, ultimately, the way that I learned what made a good image good and a bad image bad was by watching Jared Polin's critique series, where he would have his viewers send in their top 10 favorite images and he would sit there and critique them. So today, I have one of my viewers' top 10, 11 images coming in. These are photos by Tom Craig. He has very kindly sent in 11 of his favorite images for us to sit down and pick apart together so that we can really see everything that he's done great and things that need to be improved upon. And hopefully, from this video, you can take home some lessons that you can apply to your own photography. So let's jump into the first image. All right, so this is the first of 11 images that Tom has sent through to us. So the first few things that I like about the image in front of me here. First of all, I love how big and bold this carousel is in front of us. It takes up the majority of the frame, but then we also have this Ferris wheel that's kind of just chilling in the back. It's much smaller, but it's still very apparent. So I love how much this is taking up the frame. Obviously, we're working with a very long exposure, hence why we've got all the light trails happening. All of the horses are naturally blurred out. But I really like the fact that even though everything is pretty much blurred, as it should be in this photo, the text is perfectly sharp because I guess that part of the image, it stayed completely still during the exposure. So I really like that you can make out the writing, even though everything else, we've got these light trails going on. So we've got a decent composition going on with the carousel taking up the majority of the image, sort of center and to the left. And then on the right third, we've got the little Ferris wheel. Now, what I would say to make this image better, I'm not too sure what ISO we were working with for this image, but the more we zoom in, we can start to see that there's a decent amount of noise that's going on. We can see it sort of towards the darker end of the image there, and definitely a lot going on in the clouds. Now, the thing is that if you're shooting raw, in Lightroom, we've got this denoise AI tool that will literally clean up the image and get rid of like 99% of the noise in the image, and it's going to make it so much more cleaner. It'll look a lot sharper, and it's going to get rid of that noise that's created by shooting at a higher ISO. So I would definitely recommend popping that through Lightroom's denoise to get rid of this noise that's kind of going on and clean it up real nice. Another thing for maybe next time is I would really like to see the Ferris wheel not touching the carousel. I would really like just a little gap between the two. You'd probably have to adjust where the camera is on the tripod at this point, maybe moving it a bit more further to the right-hand side. But having these two elements not touching each other, I think would improve the image quite a bit. But otherwise, apart from just kind of separating those two elements and just maybe putting in a bit of denoise, I really like this image and I think it's quite a solid take. So we have our first iris photo. Now, I know that Tom has followed my tutorials to make these images, so I guess, you know, it's perfect. It's 10 out of 10. There's nothing to critique whatsoever. He followed my tutorial. What I will say is that this is actually a really, really great image. So he's managed to get both irises perfectly tack sharp. I mean, look at the detail. We can see every single little strand. I'm assuming he was working with a really, really good macro lens, probably a prime lens as well, I would imagine. And I really, really like the blend between the two irises and how they connect. It's pretty clean. There is no harshness between these two irises coming together. They do flow nicely. And I also like the gap that he's left here. Didn't have to leave a gap, but I think that sort of shows the infinity sign a little bit more. And it was, I guess, an artistic take on leaving a gap here. And I like it. I think it works. We obviously have the kind of explosion-y look going on as well on the right-hand side. I don't think there's anything wrong with it. Obviously, there's nothing colliding into the irises that would make them explode, but it's a cool effect to have that kind of fills out the frame a bit more, and it kind of creates this whole bottom left to top right look. It has that diagonal cut throughout the entire image. So honestly, there's really not much to critique about this at all. I think he's done a very, very great job in taking the image, making both irises so incredibly sharp, and the post-production on it is really, really good. So I think this is a solid image. Now, we have another iris photo. I can definitely tell that there was a bit of inspiration from my very first iris tutorial going on in this image here. If I had to take a guess, I would say that this is probably one of Tom's first images that he's experimented with iris photography, and the previous one is a later one. Now, the reason I think that is because I'm seeing a few improvements going on. Number one, you'll notice that the cuts around the irises here is quite harsh. The difference between this iris going into the black background, it's a very fine cut line. Whereas if we go back to the previous image, you can see that there's a lot more feathering going on between the background and the iris itself. So in this one, it seems to be a very harsh cut circle, whereas previously in this image, we have a lot more of a feathering happening, which I think gives a lot more of a professional look, which is why I think this one is an early example. But still though, we're working with very decent sharpness. We've managed to capture every single strand within the iris, so it looks incredibly good. We've got the whole explosion effect going on. So we've got like the collision of two irises and an explosion happening from that. I think that the explosion elements look really good towards the bottom here, and also towards the top. However, I'm not the biggest fan of the elements that are happening in the middle. The only reason why I'm not a big fan of these elements are these big chunks that are happening. For whatever reason, it's taken the immersiveness of that explosion away from me. I feel like this is a very harsh blobs that we're seeing on the screen rather than explosion elements. We're just looking at blobs almost. So I think what you've got going on down here is definitely a lot better. Notice how the elements, they're a lot smaller, and it even like kind of gives this mist effect. Like it almost looks like we've got this little puff of cloud going on down here, and the same up here, we've got like misting going on. But in the middle, I feel like it's just a little bit too harsh with the blobs. So I think an improvement for this would be maybe a reduction of the kind of middle section, and definitely some feathering to go along the iris. But I'm giving that a critique for this particular image. It looks as though you've already improved upon that sort of thing with this image. So it's really good to see that the direction that you go in with your iris photography, it's improving. You're clearly going in the right direction. So that's brilliant to see. Oh, right. Where do I start? Okay. So I remember being 15 years old, 15, 16, whatever I was, and experimenting with photography for the first time. And when I discovered HDR for the first time and the sort of crazy editing that you could do with it, I did this exact same thing. So although I'm going to be critiquing this image, I've done the exact same thing. I'm going to pull up an image that I took when I was in sixth form, I guess the Americans, college, high school, whatever you want to call it. So back when I was studying photography, and I came across HDRs, this is one of the images that I took. So again, I have my own over-the-top HDR edited to high heaven mess. And I guess in some situations, it definitely works. For my image, I had this very broken down, rustic, abandoned building, railways covering it up, and it was a mess. And honestly, so was my editing. But I kind of grew out of it, if you get what I mean. This is even more chaotic with the editing. Now, for me personally, as a professional photographer, with my own opinions, which will obviously differ from person to person, I don't like it. I don't like how unnatural it looks. I don't like how overexposed, and it's almost like I've been flashbanged. It's mental. It's an absolutely mental image. However, if I refer back to the email that Tom sent me, he literally stated, the Iron Bridge image is my best seller. So although from the whole bunch that I've looked over, this is by far my least favorite image, it's his bestseller. And I think this is one of those times where as a professional photographer, you look at this and go, bloody hell. But then the general public look at it and go, whoa, that's really cool. So who am I to sit here and say it's bad when it's clearly doing him the rounds. Like, the composition itself is kind of cool. So we have a lot of rustic things going on. We've got this proper steel iron bridge. You know, it's mechanical. There's a lot of things going on. There's a lot of things happening. I think there's a lot going on in the background. So sort of in this area here, I kind of want to be focused on the metal bridge. But the fact that all of the houses and buildings in the background, they're so incredibly, well, they're very similar in color to the bridge. So it loses that depth. It kind of all blends into one. The only thing that really starts distinguishing the metal is the fact that over here we've got, you know, blue and green going on. That definitely distinguishes it from the background. But when we look at the house there compared to the metal here, it all blends together and it becomes very hard to distinguish it apart from each other. So yeah, final verdict, it's not for me. I don't think it would be a big image for other professional photographers, but hey, if the general public like it and it's your bestseller, have at it. Okay, so this image is really giving sort of like, I don't know why, but post-war vibes. Maybe it's because of the flower of choice is kind of giving me post-war vibes. So things that I like about it, it's very artsy-fartsy, isn't it? You know, you've got an image of a beach, and on that beach, we've got an image of the same beach, as if someone's out there kind of like painting the scenery that's in front of it. So I think that's kind of cool. It's very university, very artsy-fartsy, that kind of thing. In terms of composition, we're working with a lot of great things here. The image of the image is on the left third. We've kind of got this mountain and lighthouse happening towards the right. We've got the landscape happening towards the bottom third, and then the very cloudy sky happening towards the top third. So I really like the composition of this image. It's composed very well. So I really like this. I think that this image is probably a part of a story. Obviously, we're just seeing the one image as it is, completely taken out of context. So I don't really know why the things that are happening in this image are happening. So I'm just going to judge this based on a completely out of context image presented to me. So yeah, as I said, I absolutely love the composition. Clearly some thought went into composing this image. Now, there are a couple of things that are confusing to me. Number one, why is there that there's a lighthouse in this image, but in the sort of painted version of the image, there's no lighthouse? I'm not really too sure why that is not included. It doesn't really make too much sense to me. The other thing as well is, why is there this random flower that's been sort of photoshopped into this image? I can tell that you're kind of going for the whole like, oh, it's a painting of the scenery. Clearly, we've just got an image of the beach sort of superimposed onto an image of the beach. You can kind of tell that it's just straight up cut and paste in. There's no like border or anything that would show that someone has actually gone there with a canvas or anything like that. You can just see that there is an image on top of an image. So potentially this image here was maybe taken years ago when the lighthouse wasn't there and didn't exist, or the lighthouse has been photoshopped out of it. But as the viewer, I have absolutely no idea. And I don't know why it's kind of got that whole, hey, I'm in color, but everything else is black and white. That was a very, very sort of early 2000s trend when everything went digital and people got the very early versions of Photoshop. This whole, hey, everything needs to be black and white apart from this one red thing. That was a very early 2000s, maybe 2010 sort of era thing. To have this kind of being done still in 2025, it's a bit like we need to kind of leave that trend in the past. But again, I don't know the context of this image. There could be a very good reason as to why that flower is there and why it's in color and why everything else is in black and white. I'm not too sure. I'm just judging it based off of the out of context image that I've been presented. Next up, we have our first portrait. Now, before I dive into anything to do with the portrait, the first thing I need to know is, are the eyes in focus? Because if we've missed focus on the eyes, the image, in my opinion, just needs to be completely scrapped. When we zoom into the image, we can see that the eyes are tack sharp. The eyelashes, you can count them individually. The eyes, you can see them perfectly. So thank God we have a portrait where the eyes are tack sharp, because that's where you first go to. When you look at a portrait, you instantly make a connection with the eyes. So I expect to see a portrait with tack sharp eyes. So let's look at the other elements of this. First of all, I absolutely love that we're turning a 2-dimensional image into a 3D image. Now, the way that Tom has done this is by taking his subject and he's given it a very out of focus background, but also a very out of focus foreground. I do this all the time with my portraits. It adds depth to the image and it kind of takes away this whole 2D look and it gives you that illusion of 3D. I try to do this with any kind of portraits or family portraits or weddings. I try to implement this technique as much as I possibly can. So to see other photographers doing it is absolutely great. So let's take a look at this. So the first bit of critique that I would give is in the background, we have this railing going on. There's two things I don't like about this railing. Number one, it kind of takes away from the fact that we're in nature, that we're surrounded by trees and greenery. This railing kind of just tells me, oh, we're in a park. We're not in a forest. We're not in some kind of cool, mystical place. No, we're just in a park. So I think having that railing out of the image would sort of bring us back to that immersiveness of being somewhere in a forest, lost and all that kind of thing. The other thing I don't like about the railing is the fact that it's cutting through the subject's head. So you can see it literally comes from left to right, straight through the subject's head. It would just, I think, be a lot better if that railing wasn't there. So maybe just finding a different part of this location that didn't have that there. I think we can also see like potentially a railing going on in the foreground here as well. I can't really tell because it's so out of focus, but there's definitely something that isn't green in front of our image. So I think just maybe changing the location slightly so that we don't have these elements would make it a hell of a lot better. As I said, I love that he's got a foreground interest going on. We've got this whole thing of it being 3D. What I do think though is that the foreground, the out of focus foreground elements are just too strong and too distracting. This is obviously a portrait of someone's face. The problem that I've got is this whole out of focus flower here is kind of blocking half of the subject's neck and a decent portion of the face as well. We've lost it to this out of focus flower. So I think improving on this image would be incredibly easy, maybe just by moving a few feet down the road, getting rid of the railings, maybe a little less happening in the foreground, and you'll have a pretty spot on image. So I don't think I've ever seen an image like this before. So 10 out of 10 for uniqueness. I've never seen a portrait like this before. It's pretty cool. Tom did say in his email that all this blood, it is fake blood, completely fake. So let's point out a couple of things. One thing that I think is actually really cool about this image is where the flash has flashed, we've picked up a lot of these water particles. Now, what they've unintentionally done is you'll notice that they're all spraying towards the subject. So they almost act like leading lines, directing your eyes towards where you want to be looking, which is our subject at the bottom. So I really like the fact that they're coming from the top of the frame all the way down to the subject and leading us to where we should be looking. And we also have some nice natural framing going on. So these rocks on the left and on the right, they kind of break up that emptiness and again, sort of direct us into where the subject is. So there's a lot of elements happening in this image that are all pointing us towards the middle of the image. Now, what I would say is I would really, really, really like to see the subject just standing a little bit to the right. I think having him just off center is kind of annoying my photo OCD, because it's one of those things that you can't really fix with cropping. Because if I kind of maybe cropped it a bit more like this, actually it works a little bit better like that. If in the crop I've now got the subject in the center, I think that looks a hell of a lot better than when it's zoomed out like this and he's kind of just off center. I really like the fact that when we crop, we've now got something like this maybe. I feel like that just completely changes the image and makes it 10 times better. So I actually really like this image. It's not an image that I would ever think to take. I think if someone put me in the same location, I probably wouldn't shoot at this time of the night. I probably wouldn't use the flash, but that's kind of what makes all of us photographers different, is the fact that we all come up with different ideas to make our own images unique. And this is definitely unique. I think it's really cool. I really like the composition. I think with just that minor crop, I think makes it that bit better. And this is what I'd like to see. Now, on to our next image. We are working with just a nice sunset with a boat on the ocean. Now, a couple of things with the composition is looking good. I will say it is a little bit snapshotty. I do like the fact that the sun is directly in the middle of the frame and that the boat is not quite touching the reflection of the sun. I like that. I think I wouldn't like it as much if the boat was like halfway through the reflections of the water. I think that would ruin it. So the fact that it's like just about to come into the reflection, I think that makes it nicer. The sky that we're working with, it's nothing extraordinary. It's just a normal sky. If anything, the majority of it is taken up by gray and black clouds. But I think ultimately what would really help this image is coming back and shooting the sunset at a different day. Maybe coming back when the sky is giving you one of those red sunsets. I think the sunset that we're working here is just a little bit bland. But I think if you came back at a different night with an insane sunset, you would work with a completely different image. Also, another thing that I've just thought about really is that when we look at this as a landscape, there's really not much going on in the right frame, and there's really nothing going on in the left-hand side. There's nothing of value happening. Again, it's a lot of dead space. Everything though is happening here. If we were to just edit this, if we maybe turned it into a 4:5 crop, and just slightly skewed the landscape because it wasn't entirely straight. Now suddenly, now we're working with this image. Now when we compare it to this, I do think that it looks a lot better for the simple reason that we're condensing the image down to the point where everything is happening. We've got the sky, we've got the sun and the reflections and the sea and the boat, and we have basically eliminated all of this dead space that's going on. So I think this actually works a lot nicer as a kind of nice portrait that would look really nice as you're scrolling through Instagram. But again, though, I still think that this would be 10 times better just coming back a different night for a different sunset. But I think what we're working with here, this kind of crop kind of gives you that sort of postcard vibe, you know, or that nice scrolling through Instagram of, ooh, that's a very nice sunset. Look at that boat. That's really cool. Now, what I will say is that Tom does have a website. It is tomcraigphotoart.com. He also has an Instagram as well, so please make sure to check him out. I don't know why his account is private. It's a photography account, Tom. Open it up to the public. People want to see your photography. They don't want to have to request to look at you. Show them your art like you have on your website. So yeah, Tom is definitely going down the route of iris photography. We can see that he does all different types. You've got the figure of 8. We've got some like liquid going on here as well. I think this is incredibly cool. Tom hasn't submitted these. I'm just going through the website myself. I think this one is really incredibly unique. This image needs to be removed from your website ASAP. That's not a good reflection as to your work. This is a good reflection as to your work. That is incredibly sharp, looks amazing. That looks like you took it on a film camera. So show your best work, Tom. Like, this is insane. Look at the detail on that. It almost kind of reminds me of an aquarium. This looks insane. So please make sure to check out Tom's website. It's by far an easy thing to do, to have your favorite images be critiqued by some random guy on YouTube. So honestly, a huge thank you to Tom for letting me sit through and talk about the things that I really like about your images and the things that I would personally improve upon. But otherwise, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.